G'day, I'm Scott Poynton and welcome to the TFT Earthworm podcast.
Hello Scott.
How are you, Barry? We've got a very special guest with us today, Barrie Oldfield, and if you have listened to our first Earthworm podcast, you'll hear that I talked about an interview with Richard St Barbe Baker, and we played an excerpt from the interview in that first podcast. And Barrie is very special to me because it was Barrie that all those years ago, back in 1979, that did that interview with Richard St Barbe Baker. And so Barrie has been a very strong influence in my life, even though I didn't know him until only a few years ago when I discovered that Barrie was the one that did the interview. I initially thought it was Robin Williams who broadcast the interview on the Science Show. And I've come here today, we're not in Perth, in fact we're in the Perth Hills, in a part of Perth Hills called Les Murdy, where Barrie has lived for the past 52 years with his wife Sally, and we're sitting in Willoughby Park, which is a beautiful part of a little small, less than an acre of wilderness, as Barrie calls it.
It's almost a garden. I regard it as a wildlife garden, really.
So this is a special Forestview, Barrie.
Very, very special, yes.
And now Willoughby Park, I know you said to me, oh, it's only a tiny thing, but for you it's an important symbol, I think. It's as you said, it's a little patch of wilderness, 1 hectare of wilderness at a time, or is it 1 acre even of wilderness?
It's 0.27 of a hectare. It's less than 1 acre, I think.
Right.
See, the trees up here are very, very healthy, and we have 13 jarrah trees on this very small piece of land. That is most unusual. And the jarrahs are, of course, part of the anchor of the whole reserve. It's the roots of the jarrahs that intermingle with the roots of the acacias and the she oaks and the marri trees, and provide a matrix in the soil into which the mushrooms and the mycorrhizal material all grows. And that, of course, makes a wonderful bed for the wildflowers and the understory and the shrubs. So.
And I can see we've got, what's this one here, Barrie?
This one is Triandra sessilis. This is one of the pioneer trees that comes in when you clear land. So it's a very common tree, but it's perfectly native. It's a wonderful source of nectar, and it flowers for a long, long period anyway. This one has already been flowering. You see dead flowers on there, plenty of new flowers coming, and buds as well. So it's very healthy.
It looks great. Look at, there's another. What's this one, Barrie? Look.
Ah, yes.
The little grass trees.
That's a black boy, or balga. It's a most remarkable tree. It grows only about 1 foot in 100 years. Very, very slow growing. And we've got more mature ones over here, and these have sent up spears. Last year they sent up their spear, which goes 4 or 5 feet higher than the centre of the shrub, and that is the flower spike, and then that will die back, and then it'll carry on growing again.
It's a great thing. It's a great spot. We have another one there. Look, another flower there.
Ah, yes, that's Philothecus plicata.
There's a lot of flowers here. We weren't sure we were going to see any.
Well, that's right. It's the rain that brings them on. And of course they're still in bud mostly. They're not fully open yet because we've only had about an hour of sunlight today.
No, I did spot another blue one in there, but we can maybe go into that one later on.
Okay.
Tell us the story of Willoughby Park and the work you did to get this small, botanical garden really set aside.
Well, initially this was regarded as waste land. It was just a leftover bit of bush, and it really had no value as far as the council was concerned. It was a liability because it could have started a fire any time, and they would have had a problem. And of course the local people just dumped rubbish in here. Apart from the litter, they would dump lawn clippings and so on, and it was neglected, totally neglected. The cars that we see parked here are now restrained by pine bollards, but before the bollards they would be nosing in under the trees in the shade in the summer. So it was a very neglected little patch of land. Anyway, about 6 years ago I was wandering through here and looking at it, and I spotted this little purple flash of colour in the grey bush, and I thought it was a sweet wrapper. And so I went in there to pick it up, and I discovered that in fact it was one of the wildflowers. It was a beautiful hovia. As a result of this, I went home, got the camera, and came back, and I took a few pictures of this hovia. And my way of doing pictures with wildflowers is to make portraits of them. You regard the flower as deeply as you would the face of a person sitting in front of a camera. And therefore, the light has got to be absolutely right. The background has got to be not confusing in any way. You've got to get, obviously, the focus and only the flower itself as the focus of the picture. And so I came back, took a picture, and it turned out very well. And so as a result of this, I kept an eye on this reserve, and over the next 4 years would have photographed 87 different wildflowers.
In this tiny patch.
Very tiny patch. And those flowers I printed up and I put them in a book and sent them to the Shire Council and said, look, this is quite a precious little reserve. Can we do something about it? I'd like to stop the litter being dumped here. Well, the Shire, fortunately, recognised the value of these flowers, not only because of the variety, but the fact that they are so close to human habitation. You don't have to go marching off into the forest to find them.
Well, we should say, I mean, so people can understand, we're sitting here on this little stump, and 10 metres away is the car park of the Les Murdy shopping centre.
Yes.
And just over the other side we've got houses, and behind us we have the local primary school.
The school, yes.
And,
yes.
you know, the forest itself is, how big, Barry? 50 metres, maybe?
It wouldn't be 50 metres wide.
50 metres wide and maybe not even 100 metres long.
100 and something long,
100,
yes,
yeah, so
yes.
it's a tiny little patch. And as you say, people were wandering through here, dropping rubbish, not really
That's
paying
right.
much attention. And now here we have, with the birds singing in the trees above us, a little reserve that,
Yes.
because of your book and your photographs, the council realised what an asset they had.
Well, that's right. You need to sort of bring it to their attention. You can't just sort of write a letter and say, let's do something about it. They do need physical evidence. And the Shire Council here is very aware of the asset of the bush and the forest around the Shire.
So here we are in this wonderful park, but this has been part of a much bigger journey for you, Barry. That, well, I think your initial journey started all those years ago when you grew up in England, and I know you had a passion for nature then, but you've come here to Western Australia and you had a wonderful gift of filmmaking, and you filmed E.F. Schumacher, and he came here and you took him to the Kerry Forest. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we had a problem with the Kerry Forest insofar that it was being chipped for pulp for the Japanese paper pulp industry, and we all felt that this was the wrong thing to do with Kerry trees, because these magnificent trees. And so we decided to make a film, and I managed to get a grant from the Experimental Film Fund in those days, which I'd been working with for a year or two. Now, this fund required you to say who was going to be the narrator. The people I was working with all wanted to have local environmentalists as narrators for this. And I said, look, this is no good at all, because if you have a local environmentalist, the only people who look at the film are those who already know about the chipping industry.
And you risk pushing the local politicians away, presumably.
Yeah, well, that as well. But the other thing about having just the local environmentalists in charge means that you turn off the very people you want to convince that we're doing the wrong thing. And so I decided we needed to bring somebody from outside, somebody who hadn't even been to Australia, but someone who had a different view of the value of trees. Now, Schumacher had several things in his favour. One, he was the world's greatest economist. He wrote that book, Small is Beautiful, which is a wonderful way of understanding economics. As he said in his book, or the subtitle of the book, A Study of Economics as If People Mattered. And that was the one thing. But he was also a member of Men of the Trees and a member of the Soil Association. And so, therefore, Schumacher, to my mind, seemed to be the right choice. Well, in fact, he did a magnificent job.
It was a terrific film.
I remember the scene where he was sitting amongst these karri trees and seeing the way they were being cut and chipped, these magnificent trees, and he was saying really what we are doing with the forest you could call obscene. And this had a wonderful effect, a ripple effect right through government as well as the industry and as well as the people in the ordinary population who were aware of the conflict but didn't know what to do about it. As a result of that, the heavy pressure on the forest was eased off, and we had a conservator of forests in those days. We haven't had one since. The forest was restructured, the management of the forest was restructured. So we've become very much aware now that the value of the karri far exceeds the value of the wood chips.
And another interesting thing that came out of your movie was that it was shared in England with Richard St Barbe Baker.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing, is that Schumacher died, unfortunately, 2 months after we shot the last scene. And I sent a print to England, to the Schumacher family, and it finished up in the hands of his secretary, Lolly Carter. And she lived in Forest Row in Sussex. And near Forest Row was a school. And one day, Richard St Barbe Baker came to that school and gave a talk to students. And when the talk was over and everybody had gone home, she produced this film and asked the projectionist to put it on. He was a bit reluctant, I think, because he should have been home to tea. But anyway, Richard St Barbe Baker sat with Lolly Carter and they watched the Schumacher film right through. And Richard St Barbe was absolutely overcome with this, and he said, look, Schumacher has said in 45 minutes what I've been trying to say for 45 years. And he was so taken by this that he made certain that he was going to pay a visit to Western Australia and set up a branch of the Men of the Trees here.
And tell me how that came about, because I think it also involves Prince Charles, who obviously became very passionate about forest as well, or probably was already, but suddenly you got a telegram.
Well, yes, okay. He showed, St Barbe got hold of the film and he showed it to Prince Charles, and round about that same time he encouraged Prince Charles to become patron of the Men of the Trees, yes. And then the following March, this was March 79, I got a telegram saying, arriving Perth Airport, such a flight, St Barbe. Well, I mean, I hadn't had really any correspondence or contact with Richard St Barbe Baker personally, but I did know who he was. And so I met the flight. I met the flight with Charles Peaty, who was a forester, and I'd been working with him on the Schumacher film, as a matter of fact, because I'm not a forester. I'm a filmmaker. But Charles is the man who knows all the answers when it comes to forestry. And so I thought, well, he'll come along and we'll do this, meet St Barbe together at the airport and see where it goes. Well, the following day, we founded the West Australian branch of the Men of the Trees, and there were 6 of us there. There were the lady and husband of the house where St Barbe had stayed for the night. They were Baha'is, as a matter of fact. There was Charles and Margaret Peaty, Charles being the forester. There was Richard St Barbe Baker, of course, and there was me. I was the odd one out.
You were the odd one, the filmmaker.
I was the odd one out. But knowing that he was a very famous man and he was going to fly out the next day, I thought, well, we'll grab an opportunity. So I took a tape recorder along with me, and we sat on the settee at this house, and we recorded a conversation together. And I can't say that it was a very well-structured interview, because I was ill-prepared. I was also not a forester, and I had to be able to sort of catch what he was saying and follow up, hopefully make some logic of
intelligent questions to follow up with.
Yeah. So anyway, we finished up with about 3/4 of an hour of recording on this tape. St Barbe did very well indeed, I know, and I flustered away. And the end of it was I went back to WAIT, as it was, West Australian Institute of Technology, and I put the tape in the top drawer and I left it there for a month because I didn't think it was very good. But a month later I pulled it out and played it over, and I thought, well, there's A few little bits in there probably Robin Williams would like to hear.
At the science show.
Yeah, of the science show, yes. Robin and I had some conversations because we were both very, very great followers of Schumacher. And so we already had a rapport there. Well, Robin put the tape to air and the response was just unbelievable. And it was purely the voice and the quality and the sincerity of St Barb himself that carried the day.
And I think it was his message as well. I mean, this was the interview that changed my life, and you're very humble about it, Barry. I think the power of a good interviewer is often not to be seen to be there, and you were there prompting him with his questions, but you opened him up, and he spoke so heartfelt concern for the forest that I know it captured my attention, and I think it was the breadth of the discussion that you had with him. I remember when I listened to it, I was this little fellow growing up in Gippsland, and suddenly he was talking about Canada and Africa, the Sahara, Egypt, of the road to Jericho, planting trees, and I was transported around the world, sitting in my lounge room at home in Gippsland. Yes. And that was the power of that interview. And it was, I think it captured so many people's imaginations.
No, well, it was Richard St Barb Baker. He had all the facts and figures, and he had said those things so many times in so many different places. And he travelled the world. I mean, right to the end of his life. I mean, he was on his umpteen world tour at the time when he died. He was in Canada. And he lived in New Zealand, so he was always on the move. Preaching
the protection of forests and planting trees everywhere he went.
Yes, indeed. And even when he left us, he said, now I have to get down into South America to the River Plate, where lots of things are happening which should not happen. And so he was focused on that particular destiny, taking his message to the people in Argentina and Southern America.
And he was 90 years old at this stage.
He was, actually the first time I met him he would have been 88. He was 91 when he died. Yes.
91 when he died. But that set forth massive changes here in Australia with the land care movement in greening Australia.
It did indeed. Well, our Men of the Trees here grew by leaps and bounds, and we were responsible partly for the beginning of greening Australia here. And the growth of the movement was quite remarkable. We were very good at planting trees. We said, well, we must go and do something about this. So we used to get bands of people together. We had about 1,200 members at one stage. And we would go out into the wheatlands, which is where too much clearing had taken place, and help the farmers understand that the right trees in the right place would cut down wind erosion, and they would cut down salinity and things like this.
Better for their crops.
Better for their crops, yes. And so what we did as an organisation, Men of the Trees, was organise these plantings into the country. And over the next few years, while I was president anyway, we planted 9 million trees like this. Well, planting trees is one thing, but Richard St Barb Baker says what we have to do is save the forests, save the tropical forests of this world. We didn't know how to do that. You did.
Well, I'm not sure I know, but we're giving it a go. But this is the story. I think this is why it's so fascinating for me to hear your story, Barry, because, as you said, you were very humble about it. I'm just a filmmaker, you say. But you could have not bothered with interviewing Schumacher. You could have not bothered to pick up that tape recorder when you went to see St Barb. And none of us would have heard that story. None of us would have heard his interview. He would have been in and out of Australia, and probably none of us would have noticed. And yet here we are. The land care movement in Australia was very helped pushed along, which has done incredible things to help revegetate environments in Australia and farmland. You've got Greening Australia, you've got Men of the Trees, 9 million trees just yourself, just the organisation here in Western Australia, now up to 13, I think.
13 now, yes.
13 million trees. You've just broken the world record.
And a world record, yes, 100,000 trees in 1 hour.
100,000 trees in an hour. That's 2,000 people out going like crazy. And look, these are extraordinary achievements, and of a long life of your own, Barry. Well lived and inspiring lots of people in your very humble way. And I know you're a bit humble about that, but
I'm an opportunist. If I see there's a chance here to do something worthwhile, let's do it.
Yeah.
It's the same with photographing the wildflowers here. Yeah, it's nice to take a picture of a wildflower, but if we can use that picture, and a dozen others as well, to get some work to protect this reserve and understand its true value, then yes, of course, let's do it.
Let's do it. And look, who knows what school children from the primary school will wander through here and be touched by the nature that's now preserved. And not just preserved because, the trees were here, the nature was here, but it was so destroyed, wasn't it? I mean, it was just a garbage dump.
It wasn't brought to their attention, but now they know what's here. And we've got some signage that tells them about this. And so, yes, we can make small steps forward and hopefully bring it into the general public awareness that they have a precious resource here that people from all over the world would come to see.
Right. And, and I think that's the message from your work, Barrie, for me, is that every one of us can do something. Every one of us can sow a seed in someone's mind. And you certainly sowed a seed in my mind with that interview. And it's just a pleasure talking with you today, Barrie, and thanks so much.
Thank you, Scott.
Wonderful. Thank you.